Hi, everybody. We are back. It is 4 o'clock, and we are going to talk about mannequins this afternoon. Interesting enough, as you just heard in the last conversation, many people aren't even aware of the industry or where you can have an opportunity in the industry. But before we talk with Miss Judi Townsend, I want to note she is the only Black-owned U.S. distributor of mannequins in the U.S. So before we have that conversation, we just want to share a clipping of a video of her as seen in Bloomberg. So one moment.
Mannequins are made of materials that do not biodegrade. Fiberglass, plastic, styrofoam, metal, these things do not need to be put in the landfill. But prior to us, that was kind of generally what most stores would do. So we make it easy. We make it free for them. I have a network across the country, so I can pretty much recycle mannequins in most major cities throughout the US. I say we average about 300,000 pounds of mannequins every 3 months. I had no idea it had this kind of potential, but I've always been big about how can we repurpose something and create some more value out of it. So that's really what drove me, and making money came along with that. We're gonna be on target this year to reach $1 million in sales.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I have Miss Judi Townsend with me all the way from California. Hey!
I am in Oakland, California, far from the fashion centers of the world, but yet I can still have a lucrative business in the fashion industry.
And you heard her just talk about she's on track to make $1 million. Y'all need to be listening to this conversation. But you know what? Before what we're going to do, I'm so glad for a variety of reasons, connecting with Miss Judi. She's educated me about the industry, this $13 billion industry. So at first, we're going to talk about the industry. We're going to talk about some things most of us, myself, did not know. Then we're going to dive into the industry, because this is really more of that entrepreneurial segment. But Miss Judi, talk to us. Tell us about some of the unknown facts in the mannequin industry.
Yeah, so mannequins are just like daily life in terms of they reflect what they think the current standards of beauty are, which are young, thin, white, and Anglo. Occasionally now we are seeing some mannequins that are curvier, but that's been a long time coming. And in the past, if there was a curvy mannequin, she was kind of matronly looking, not really realizing you can still be sexy and have curves. But the biggest issue that surprised me about mannequins was what I call the whitewashing of mannequins. Can we cue up the slideshow I wanted to show you? Because it's one of those things that you're probably totally not aware of unless you're a mannequin insider. So when the first slide, you're going to see a well-known model who was very popular. I wanted to come in one at a time, but if not, that's okay. This is Billie Blair, and she was a Halston model back when Halston was in his heyday in the early 70s. There was a big fashion event in Paris called the Battle of Versailles that pitted American designers against French designers. And that single event is credited with making American sportswear the global brand that it is. Billie Blair was one of those models, and then they turned her into a mannequin, which you'll see in that catalog on the page beside there. And you see she's in this really dramatic pose. Unfortunately, if you look at the next slide, a lot of mannequin people, retailers and private collectors, they love that mannequin, but they paint her white. As you see, she is very light skinned. In this case, she even has green eyes and blonde hair. And what's so horrifying to me about that is this is an iconic woman. And the fact that they are just not only making her lighter skin, because sometimes they even make her lighter skin than what her real complexion is, but they can now make her into a white woman. So that if you didn't know that, you would just think you're looking at a white woman. And that's just very sad to have that with such an iconic person. If you look at the next slide, this is another example of she's not as well-known model, but she's another Black mannequin, and that's the pose that she's in. And if you look at the next slide, you see that she too had been painted white. And then you can see the dark skin kind of peeling underneath, over the time as that's faded. And what happened is there's just like a few little periods in time in which stores say, oh, we have to have a Black mannequin in the window, usually it's after the civil rights something or other. The first civil rights movement after George Floyd. Most of the time, they don't have many Black mannequins. And they usually never have more than one Black mannequin in a window at a time. That you may see two, but you will never hardly see three mannequins at one time unless they're doing a tribute to the Supremes or something like that. That's the only time I've heard that there's been more than three. But as you can see, that disciple, the mannequin is still a great mannequin, but let's just paint her white. So therefore we can still utilize the mannequin. So someone found this at a flea market and said, something's kind of different here. What's going on? I said, oh, that's really a black mannequin. That's why. One more picture. And you could see this is mannequins that have all been painted white, because I know sometimes stores want to have uniformity. And I kind of can understand that. At least it's a little bit better if everybody's painted white versus we just have the black one that's painted white. You see the guy on the left is African-American male. And if you look at the next slide after that, you can see his features much more clearly. These were mannequins that were used in both Nike and Nordstrom's. I know had these kind of mannequins. And once again, you have to look closely to see that it's black, but at least then they can say, yes, we do have representation, but it still seems like colorism is very much a reality in the mannequin world, just like in daily life. So that's just my little backstory. So next time you look at mannequins in the window, you don't see that many realistic ones anyway now, because that was a way they could just kind of avoid that subject altogether, as all mannequins are either headless or egghead. But even when you do see realistic mannequins, just notice those details.
That's good. So, I think that's the last slide, or was there another one?
The other ones when we start talking about my career journey a little bit.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk about, first of all, let me stop and say thank you for that, because we need to know that. Those are those facts that we don't know. So thank you for that.
I'm sorry that I have to show it, quite frankly. And once again, I said mannequins are no different than the fashion industry, where a standard of beauty is a certain kind of way. Mannequins just reflect that. So it's just deep. It just goes in all aspects of our life.
And to buy.
Let's talk about the positives, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. But you can, moving on. Let's talk about the purpose of mannequins. The role that they serve in retail marketing and fashion designs. How important are the mannequins in telling the story for that designer, or in communicating that brand's values?
Mannequins are like the chorus girl of a show. They're the behind the scenes. They're never the star, but they make the star look good. Without mannequins, you cannot design the clothing. When I say mannequins, that also means dress forms and other kind of body shapes. And you need either for the display or the design. And they've always been around. And that's why I'm really happy to share my story, because a lot of times people think fashion industry, you have to be either the kind of people out front, a stylist or a designer or a retailer. All of those have really, really high volatility and sometimes a short shelf life. But mannequins have always been around in some shape or form. How they made their changes, but their changes in their shapes and forms, but they're always around. So I just want to say this is a way in which you can have longevity in the fashion industry, but it's behind the scenes. Being a supplier, I have worked with every major store that I probably would not have had a chance to if I was trying to sell them something. Instead, what I do, most of my business, I'm recycling mannequins from major stores when they close or remodel. There's so much waste in the retail industry. We all talk about sustainability now. Most of the time when they talk about sustainability, they're talking about the production of clothing. But there's a lot of waste that happens on the back end. A store closes, a store remodels, a store says, oh, those style mannequins are no longer the style that we need for this style clothing. And they just decide to get rid of them. So they would just throw these mannequins in the landfill, even though they still may be purely still very functional. They're maybe just not the latest style. And we all know that putting certain things in the landfill is not good. And I'm particularly concerned as a woman of color because many times landfills are closer to Black and brown communities. So anything that I can do to keep mannequins, which are not biodegradable, out of landfills, and then to resell them at discounted prices to people who can't afford the price of a brand new mannequin. So it's a whole kind of circular economy thing. It's a way for me to be in the fashion industry. As I said, I'm in Oakland, nowhere near LA or New York City. The beauty of the internet allows me to be in the fashion industry without having to be in the fashion capitals. And then secondly, I have the longevity. I've been in business 20 years, which is a long time to be anything related into the fashion industry. But I'm not well known. You're not going to see me on the cover of Vogue or something like that. But I just like to encourage people to look at other kind of ways to create a business in the fashion industry that may have more longevity than, say, being a designer.
Yeah. How did in COVID, I mean, did that really impact you at all?
Totally. I mean, mainly because the business just kind of shifted. Number one, especially where I live, a lot of stores were closing because the cost of living was so high here. But instead, people were then shifting to do things online. So I was selling more individual mannequins to people versus a store ordering 5 or 10. I might have 10 individuals buying one mannequin because now they needed to put their inventory online. We also find that people were using mannequins for a lot of DIY projects, which I'll show you in one of the slides, is that people are always fascinated with the human form. So even though mannequins, people think, oh, most of our customers are retail stores, there are a lot of people who use a mannequin for art projects. They're making lamps out of them. They're making Christmas trees out of them. Many times people who are sewing or knitting, just a home user just wants to have a mannequin and put them on there. And then a lot of times people just have a mannequin for Halloween, for Burning Man. Many times they just want mannequin parts, hands, legs, heads. We also started doing a workshop here where people could take a mannequin head and then they can make a flower crown headdress on that mannequin head, because we had tons of mannequin heads. So all different kinds of ways that I could still do something kind of sustainability, mannequin related, and it just kind of grew from there. I started with just one little thing. I was just going to be renting mannequins on the as a side hustle. I
Mm.
rented mannequins for about 9 months, and then 9/11 happened. And I had to choose then, did I want to go look for another job? Or even when the mannequin business was still kind of fledgling, did I want to stay with that? And I think it's the same time like now where people are at a crossroads, like really what do they want to do at their life? And I had no idea, quite frankly, the mannequins had this much potential. I just knew that I liked it. I knew the internet allowed me to reach people that I would not normally reach. Like, for example, I sell a lot on Etsy, because there's a whole different kind of type of person who goes on Etsy that may not normally look on my website. So there's so many different channels you can sell. I have a warehouse here where local customers come in. I sell online. I sell on Etsy. Sometimes I sell on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. I think there's no better time to be a Black entrepreneur on any industry, but I'm just talking about fashion, than right now. I've never seen more opportunities for outlets and platforms, obviously using social media to put the word out there, as well as there's more grants and fundings and support for Black-owned businesses.
Mhm. And why should somebody consider? Now we're in your area, you're doing business with it. Yeah, there's a whole industry out there as far as making them as well. Why should somebody consider a business in mannequins?
Well, making them is a whole different ball of wax. Production is a lot more challenging. I can only speak more to the distribution aspect of things. And I know
Hmm.
that many times people like to buy from who they like sometimes. So
Right.
sometimes I'm selling the exact same product that somebody else has, but they're coming to me because maybe I have a stronger presence. I have greater customer service ideas. I blog, giving people really suggestions on how to more effectively use their mannequins. Like I did a whole series on, if you're a museum exhibition on fashion, here's some tips for selecting the right mannequins for that. So putting that word out there has positioned me as an expert like that. So then they will come to me to buy that product, even though they may be able to find it from somebody else.
Hmm.
I don't want to talk about production. That's a whole different kind of issue. But I will
Right.
just say, if you can find other ways to create a niche and putting your own stamp on it, kind of like the stylist who's really popular right now, who we talked about the other day. He does Zendaya,
Bar Roach.
Paul Roach. Even though stylists existed, he said he had to create his own way in. And I'm just thinking, in general, many times that's what we've had to do is create our own way in. What I'm doing was something that really wasn't there. Yes, sometimes there were people who recycled mannequins, but not in a big way. And because I created a network of people across the country, so if the Gap is remodeling and they have mannequins in New Jersey, I can't go to New Jersey and pick them up, but I created a relationship with someone in New Jersey to pick them up. They give me a finder's fee for the privilege. And so I position myself as the national liquidator, make it easy for a retail store just to call me and I'll take care of it wherever it's happening. I had to create that on my own. Out of necessity. I'm not trying to toot my horn like I'm so wonderful, but it was like, wow, an opportunity came along and said, what can I do? Even now, I'm going to be working with Carla, you guys, where if I have some mannequin liquidations in the New York City area, I'm going to funnel them through her and see if it's something that she can use or have any of her clients who could use them versus me trying to get them to bring them out here. So that's just a way I think of building bridges and connections that didn't exist before. Before, people were just only recycling, if at all, in their own immediate area and not really concerned about someplace else. I want all mannequins out of landfills, period. And then I want other people to have an opportunity to buy a mannequin at a discount price. And if that means working with Carla to help facilitate that, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, and you got a new client too, Dr. Dwayne. This is how you build that network. But and the thing about it is, Judi, you're not tooting your own horn, you're stating facts. So what, being one to create your own path, what is that like?
Some days it's exhilarating and other days it's hard. Now, I came in the industry as a total outsider. I had not had any retail experience. I had never even touched a mannequin before. I just like mannequins as like giant Barbie dolls. So I think it started first with just having a passion. Okay. So it started with that. I was excited about it. I love just the artistry of mannequins. And I think because I was an outsider, it allowed me to come in and see a new perspective. Most stores were just routinely throwing the mannequins away because that's just what they did. They didn't realize that there was a secondary market for mannequins for people who didn't have a retail store because they weren't in that world. I knew, because I had always wanted a mannequin to put in my garden, that it would be great to find a mannequin price. I don't want to spend a whole lot of money for it, but I wanted to look pretty and put it in my yard. So coming in from a new perspective, I use that to my advantage, even though I was an outsider. That didn't mean that initially some people kind of like didn't really want to, quote unquote, welcome me into the club. But the beauty of the internet is you can kind of create your own lane, which makes it a lot nicer in that regard. And I was saving stores money. In the past, if the store was throwing away a mannequin, they had to, rent those huge dumpsters. That's expensive. And so I said, look, I'll recycle your mannequins for free. I'll pick them up at no charge. That got their attention. The fact that it was an eco-friendly way to get rid of their mannequins was sort of secondary. Stores are a little bit more concerned about being sustainable now, but back then it was like, oh, I can do this for free versus having to pay for my dumpster fees. I'll go ahead and work with you. That's how I started working with Nike, Nordstrom's, The Gap, Ralph Lauren. Those are some of my early big customers because I was helping to save them money. I made my money by then reselling the mannequins. If I was trying to get them to pay me to take the mannequins away, probably wouldn't have worked because they're like, why should we pay you? We'll just
let's talk about that, because oftentimes, people of all ages, I'm not going to say millennials or anything like that. I don't like to do that, but people of all ages, there's no, you got to put some grease into it. But you started out with that free. I'll pick them up for free. So talk about how sometimes you have to start.
You do. And it was amazing because back in the time, my ex-husband and I, we would rent a cargo van. We drove to every Sears store in the Bay Area within a 100-mile radius, picking up the mannequins ourselves, putting them in the van, then unloading them in the van, out of the van. It was a lot of work, but we had sweat equity. I had more sweat equity than I had actually money to pay. So doing that worked. And for the longest, I even had mannequins at my house. It took a while before I even moved to a warehouse. That was a way in which I could save money. But yes, I was trying to think, what can I do that would be an incentive to the stores? Sure, I think they should pay me to take them away. They pay a waste management fee. Why not pay me? I knew that I was an unknown entity, so they weren't going to pay someone they didn't really know. And I needed to have them change their behavior. And if you want someone to change their behavior, just as in any life, you have to give it a reason or incentive why. And money talks. Money talks.
Were there any things that
you can barter things too? There's barter, there's free. And I think sometimes just open up our mind about what else we might be able to do to create value that isn't always an exchange of cash.
Yeah. Well, what were some of you went into it on a whim. What were some of the things that occurred? I can't say expectations, but maybe that happened that you didn't expect, and how did you navigate them?
When I first started, I just thought we were going to be a local business. I started in the early years of the internet. It was like 2001. So no one had an e-commerce site then. What happened was I did put up a website because I knew the value of a website. I just didn't know how broad it would reach.
Right.
Recycled some mannequins from Ralph Lauren. There was some very high-end mannequins that are no longer produced. I got a phone call from Prada in Italy, not the Prada New York office, Prada in Italy. They saw these mannequins and they wanted them. And the fact that they could get a good price on them was a bonus, but they were just like, we want them, you got it. And at that time, I was still selling mannequins out of my backyard. But my website made us look so much bigger and professional. And that's the beauty of it. The internet really saved my business. It allowed me to reach someone that I've never been able to reach, Prada, Italy. It allowed me to have a much bigger presence than what we really had. And that's when I realized, woo, this is really something here. If I've got someone like Prada who could buy from anybody they want to, and they found me in my backyard in Oakland, California, there's something here. So ever since then, I've been very, very proactive on an online presence. Back when it wasn't that popular for this kind of industry to do. And even now, I'm always like, okay, what's the latest thing? And that doesn't mean that every platform works for me. Like I find that TikTok doesn't really work for me, even though I've given it a shot or something like that. I find that Pinterest, for example, I have like 51,000 followers on Pinterest. That's a lane that works great for me because I show a lot of DIY projects that you can do with mannequins that people like to see. In fact, I think, can we show the next slide? I want to show some of those. Because I want to say it still allows me to be creative doing mannequins. Okay, that's just showing the website so you guys can find where I am. Let's look at the next slide. The next slide is just going to show our outside of our building. We have a 3,200 square foot building here, just full of mannequins, and we also do art projects here. And I think the next slide is what I want to show. And that is showing just kind of like the range of mannequins that we have here. When I say mannequins, that also includes, jewelry forms, hosiery leg forms, things like that. Anything that you can display apparel or accessories on. And then the last slide, I think is the one I want. And yeah, that's how mannequins are being used to dress form Christmas trees, or that other one you see someone has created a lamp out of that. So those are some of the ideas that I have on Pinterest that I didn't expect when I first got started, but with the rise of the internet, I saw that people were doing creative things with mannequins, and I have the raw product to say, okay, you have an idea, you can buy the mannequin from me. And then people started asking me, well, how do we do that? So then we started offering Zoom classes and digital tutorials to show people how to make the dress from Christmas tree. So I started from just renting mannequins to all these different threads from there. One last thing I want to say, I don't produce mannequins. And so sadly, there's still not enough representation of mannequins of color or curvy mannequins. I do sell new mannequins that I get from manufacturers. Still, the variety is not there, but I have always been just an advocate, both with asking them to produce them, blogging about it, just bringing attention to the fact that we need more representation of different style mannequins. You'll probably never see an old mannequin, okay, in terms of an old lady looking mannequin. There was one that I'd seen that had been produced, and it was very limited production. Like I said, they're always going to be young-ish and thin-ish, but at least if we can start getting some different kind of colors and some sort of curves would be helpful. So I've just been trying to be an advocate about that, but because I don't produce them, I'm always at liberty of what my suppliers can provide for me.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the role of being an entrepreneur, what it takes. What type of yeah. You've already displayed some of those things, that incentive that you were offering to the stores, that creativity, that presence.
Yeah.
Talk about some of the other things that someone, needs to consider being an entrepreneur.
You have to be tenacious, that's for sure. I think tenacious and flexible, because as I said, when I first started, there was no internet. And if I wanted to just stay locked in that box, I would not have a business right now. Learning the internet was a challenge for someone my age. I'm in my 60s, so I didn't grow up, as a digital native, but I was willing to learn. I think always just having that open attitude about being willing to learn and to adjust and adopt. Also, I've learned to sometimes be friendly with my competitors, as hard as that sounds. Other people who sell used mannequins other parts of the country, they're my competitors. But if it gave me an opportunity to do a national liquidation by partnering with this person over here, it was worth doing. I'm not saying a competitor who's someone who's, trying to undercut you, but there is a way sometimes you can be a strategic partnership with the competitor to create a bigger opportunity for everybody. I got to be a national liquidator. They got mannequins they wouldn't have had before. Many times they're selling to local customers that I wouldn't have reached anyway. So why not build those partnerships? And I think particularly these past few years, we've seen nothing but polarization. I really feel like we need to see more cooperation to be able to really heal some of the rifts and to just, be better business people, So cooperation, tenacity, and open to learning.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the product is. I think that's kind of a consistent. I just happen to like mannequins. I don't know if I would be as excited if it was something that I didn't really like as much. I mean, you really have to genuinely have a commitment for what it is you like. As crazy as it is, there's something about mannequins that I like. But if you said, oh, you want to sell printers, I wouldn't have that same passion for doing printers, right?
Right.
So it's a needed thing, but it's not my thing. Instead, I found a small niche that I could blow out on all scenes. Because people say, you just sell mannequins for a living? It feels so small. No, but there's big opportunity. I rent mannequins, I sell them. I don't necessarily sell just to retailers. I said there's museums, there's artists, there's people doing trade shows. Like I said, there's people who are doing all kinds of exhibitions. That's a whole other kind of segment. The internet made it possible for people to find me. And a lot of people who would not normally have thought they could readily find a mannequin to use. Like somebody was getting married and they rented dress forms from me to display their mother and a grandmother's gowns at their wedding reception. I thought, that's a beautiful idea. I wouldn't have thought of that on my own, but by making myself available for someone else who has the idea to find me
Mhm.
creates great opportunities.
This is so good. What are some of the partnerships that you, well, I guess team partners to help you with your business to stay on top, like accountants or anything like that? What?
You definitely have all the obvious like that, you know, and any business still needs those basics. But I found like who I could work with who's maybe like an affiliate. For example, we have a photo studio here in our warehouse where many times we're doing our product shots. Well, I said, why not make that photo studio available to other photographers to come in and rent? Or people can come in and rent for a music video or a fashion thing or one of those, you know, those maternity shoots where they like, you know, be all glammed up and like, well, we can make our warehouse available for that. So always trying to find multiple streams of revenue and maybe with people who are like similar related. Or for a while we were doing dog photography because we have all these cool props we get from stores. Everybody was adopting dogs during the COVID. It's like, oh, come in and get these cute pictures with your dog that you couldn't normally get on your own. Now that's a little outside of the mannequin lane, but it was still utilizing props that we have
Creative.
stores. It was creative and it worked for a while. We're not really focusing on that right now. I mean, sometimes you got to know when to hold them, when to fold them. Some things may be a fun idea and it may be fun to you, but if you're not really making the revenue or if it takes too much effort to do it, you may have to put it aside. And I've been willing to try different things like that. Even for a while, I was selling those sex dolls, you know, those dolls that are kind of anatomically correct and people use for personal reasons. You would think it kind of related to mannequins because it was a mannequin. But first of all, I didn't feel as comfortable promoting it. It was just, it felt something a little uncomfortable to me. And then I also found that it was causing some other issues where my insurance carrier felt I was carrying adult content. And so they were giving me a hard time. I thought, you know what? It's not worth it. Even though a lot of people were buying them during COVID to keep themselves company, it was like, I was more excited doing dog photography than doing the mannequins, the sex dolls. But you know, like I said, you got to be willing to try. You don't know until you try it. As long as you're not, you know, going to lose your shirt in the process of doing it. I always say, kind of wade in easily, wade in, and then go deep. Versus put all your eggs in one thing and then like, ugh, this isn't working for me.
Yeah. Now our audience is 18 to 44. So let's go back to those business things, the basics. I think you called them, like the accountant. You know, somebody who's thinking about entrepreneurship, what are those basics that they need to have in place to be successful in business?
And I can't stress accounting and bookkeeping ever so much because it's not sexy and it's not fun. And you want to many times be out there what you're passionate about. I realized because I had a bookkeeper really helped me during COVID because I was able to apply for grants and I had all my stuff, my records together. If I had to, in the process of getting records together while being stressed out about what was happening, I would have missed some opportunities. I was one of the first people to get a PPP loan because in the first round, a lot of African American businesses were not getting PPP loans. I don't know what the exact reason was, but many times because we didn't have some of the bookkeeping together or didn't have a relationship with the banker. And it's not as if I can call my banker up and say, hey, this is Judi, but I was with a smaller bank that was a little bit more user friendly than some of the bigger banks. And I had my records together. So I'd say definitely good bookkeeping, definitely any kind of legal structure. You need to have that in place. Certainly, I think it's important to have, IT person who can make sure your website is working, your social media, make sure that you've got certain protections so you don't get hacked. Even a simple thing is trademarking your name. First, I thought, why would I want to trademark Mannequin Madness? So glad I did, because I found that someone was doing some Google ads and they used Mannequin Madness in their Google ads. Because I had a trademark name, I could send that into Google and Google then ceased them. But they were capitalizing off of my name. And people were thinking, oh, this is where I can go to buy mannequins. So I think even as small as you may think you may be, protecting your name. And that's tough because sometimes when you're first started, you don't necessarily have the money to do that. You're just trying to grow the business. But sometimes it's too late if once you've grown it and somebody else finds a way to capitalize off of your name, then everything is lost.
Hmm. And anybody who has, I see one question, but anybody who has any questions, put them into the chat. I'm looking at the time, and depending on the time, we might get to take a tour of her business. Talk about your team. What is your team made up of?
Well, for the longest, I tried to work just with independent contractors, just from a cost savings. But it comes to the point in which you have to make that commitment to have an employee. Fortunately, we work just part time. Most of our business is online, so we're only open in a warehouse 3 days a week. I call myself sort of semi-retired, and I have my team is really multifaceted. Like me, they're able to do a lot of different things. I have someone who's what I call my operations manager, and that includes everything from helping me to manage the inventory to getting mannequins shipped out to organizing our warehouse to IT. Sometimes you're like the big dreamer person, and you need someone to kind of like ground you and like, okay,
Yeah.
let's be more strategic here. Let's do, because I want to do everything. And he's the person that's like, okay, let's break this down into chunks. And sometimes that creates some tension. But when we always talk about diversity, it's not just color diversity or race or gender diversity. It's like diversity in thought. Because sometimes we have that push and pull, it gets us to a better place. And if I just went with my own ideas, I'd probably go off the rails. If we went with just his ideas, we'd be slow and prodding. Between the two of us, we come together. I have a third person on my team who is my creative designer. She also is very strategic, but a lot of the art projects that we're doing, she's the one behind that, teaching some of the classes we have. She's really great with the customer service because at this point, I really don't have the time to be seeing individual customers. It's time to turn that to somebody else. And I'm more behind the scenes, getting grants, getting more visibility. But collectively, we're the ones who are here together in the office. But then I have a lot of virtual people, virtual assistant. I recently hired a publicist because people thought that my business was just giant Barbie dolls, which it kind of is. But the environmental aspect of our business is really significant. And that's what I want to start pushing. So I hired a publicist to help change some of the messaging around that so that maybe all of us can see what kind of things are we throwing away that we could perhaps repurpose and find some more value on. How are we doing on time, Carla?
Keep going. I got it. Keep
Okay.
going.
I want to make sure. So anyway, I hired a publicist for that. And it's amazing, what she's been able to do. I have a social media person. And then I have a person who always updates my website, but they're part-time. I say as much as you can get an independent contractor, that's a good way of preserving your sales, your cash. And then better yet, you don't have to really fire someone if they're not working out. It's a different kind of thing if you just say you're independent contractor, okay, our contract is ending. Where if you have an employee, there's a lot more ramifications behind it. Sometimes you have to hire an employee. I'm not saying that, but if you can, get away with an independent contractor. And also, contractors tend to be very passionate about what they're doing. Oh, like my bookkeeper. She loves bookkeeping. As boring as that is to me, that's her world. And so she's going to be passionate about what she does. If I try to bring an employee on and try to force them to do some bookkeeping along with some other things, it's not the same. So independent contractors are usually very, very committed to what their individual product is. So I love that. And now with things like Fiverr and all these other places where you can find someone online to do some services for you, I'd say utilize those. Somebody says connection lost. Maybe
It's okay. They'll take care of it.
I want to make sure it wasn't me. Okay.
This is a question that came for. Did you take did it, excuse me, did it take you a while to figure out how to ship them to Italy? Were they broken down?
You know, they do break apart. And fortunately, Prada handled the actual shipping, and we had to pack the mannequins, but they took care of the cost. They had someone come to our location and pick those things up. And that's another thing, you know, when you're starting your business, I was passionate about mannequins. I wasn't passionate about shipping. But you have to learn those different aspects of your business. And sometimes they're just not fun. But you don't necessarily have to be an expert at it, but you have to kind of know the components. I became all of a sudden a shipping expert. I need to find out where's the best places to get my boxes. How do I get free packing materials? Where a place where people can donate their styrofoam peanuts and their air pillows. I started doing that so that I could save money on my packing costs. That's a component that doesn't really relate to mannequins, but that's part of really being able to, first of all, still be sustainable, but also to be able to save costs. But that's those kind of things when you say being an entrepreneur, you're surprised at all the different hats that you're wearing. I wish I could just stay in the mannequin lane, but no, sometimes I have to then talk to the accountant. I have to talk to shipping and receiving. I have to worry about finding the right janitor to clean our facility here. Those kind of things are just, you know, not the pleasant part that people don't always talk about. But in order to be successful, you got to be willing to take that on.
Exactly. So let's, in the few minutes we have, because we want to be respectable of time, let's take a walk through your tool. Let's take a walk through your facility. Let's see. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to grab my iPad here and I'm going to try to, what she said, walk slow, even though I'm used to what's everything in here. We're going to start in the front here because here is where we have examples of DIY projects that people do with mannequins. So they turn them into decorative objects for different seasonal displays. This is a way you can repurpose Mardi Gras beads. Okay.
You're good. I see it. Keep going.
This is a map that's been used to cover a mannequin. Decoupage, beads. Here's a Kwanzaa themed holiday tree. Valentine's Day. This is something, knitting. This is like how people can use remnants of their yarn to kind of create a little bustier, and then the little balls on that. This is really big at Christmas time. This is a Mardi Gras themed one. And then we have, here's just our bin of assorted parts. There's arms, hands, butts, legs, more hands. Sometimes we get items that are brand new. Like these pair of legs came from an Adidas store. I don't understand why they have stuff that's brand new that they're just getting rid of. So I want to let people know that used doesn't always mean like used, broken down, distressed. We get that too, but we have a lot of things that are in perfectly good condition. Like I said, it's just last year's style. The store is downsizing. Here's another brand new athletic mannequin that this one came from Reebok. It said, we work with all the big stores. It's taken a while, but our reputation is such that if you need to recycle mannequins, Mannequin Madness is the place to call. And that's why our inventory changes depending on whatever retailer we're working with. We got a bunch of stuff from Macy's one month. The next month we may be working with Christian Dior, called us for some mannequins. These are some of the props that we've made for our dog. We have dog mannequins as well.
Oh, that's
but
cute.
these are like props. Is another dog. Props that we were using when we were doing our photography studio. Because we got these great props from the retail stores. And then little fake cakes to celebrate the dog's birthday. People spend money on their dogs, don't they? And then here's, we're getting ready to do a live broadcast with Pinterest, where they want us to show people how to make, here's a spring themed holiday tree.
Oh,
and so we're gonna do a show with Pinterest. So this is our photo studio. Wave to the camera, Kiana's with my designer here. Oh, let me just go back. Oh, so you see some of these heads back here? This is what I was mentioning. We got a whole bunch of heads from a cosmetology school. The same time, we got a bunch of flowers from Macy's Flower Day. So we said, let's put them together and just create some headdresses. And now we offer classes where people can come in and make their own flower crown headdress. So to paint and sip, they're doing wine and design. Back here is where we keep, looks a little scary and dark back here. Here's where all the shipping and receiving handles, where we keep all of our back stock of inventory. I'm like a 32 square foot warehouse. Everything here is used. And imagine, we're all going into the landfills. And that's just the part I want to just stress to people. It's like, wow, Why would they throw something like this where someone can use this perfectly good dress form to display their clothes, but because Macy's didn't want them anymore, they were going to send them to landfill. So anyway, more of the same back there. We've got mannequins for days. It is called Mannequin Madness because it changes all the time, whatever we have. Now, our new mannequins are consistent, but those are just only online. But in our warehouse here is where things change all the time. Yeah, I was working on some other kind of project. There we go. This is how I first got started. Is I wanted to have a mannequin like this painted one here. I was going to put mosaic tiles on something like that and put it in my garden. Oh, it started from that one little idea to all of a sudden I found a mannequin on Craigslist and the guy was leaving the state. Okay, we're going to close them there. He was leaving the state and he ran the only mannequin rental business in town. And I bought 50 mannequins for $2,500. I've never spent that much money for so few mannequins ever again, but it got me into the game. Wow. And I was going to rent mannequins. And next thing you know, I just started getting other customers and it just started building out. And then 20 years later, here I am.
That's amazing. I have a question for you. Someone asked, have you ever thought about getting involved with selling mannequins to nail salons and hair salons, or ever received orders from those type of salons?
I do. They usually are buying the mannequin heads because usually they're displaying wigs or the type of heads that have a little shoulder because they're usually displaying jewelry and things like that. But yes, I do have a lot of hairdressers who come in and buy mannequins from me. They find me. I don't necessarily have to go and look for them. They find me either many times through Instagram or word of mouth, or they do a Google search. Why, do you have a hair salon you need to have some mannequins for?
I think that was Kiara Wellington. So if you heard Ms. Judi's questions, connect with us. We'll figure it out.
I mean, sometimes if I don't have, you can just send me a picture. I'm looking for this style, and I can say, okay, I don't have it now, but if I know I have something upcoming, then I can I have a lot of people on my wish list. Many things never make it to my website because I've been in business so long that if people are looking for something specific, I have a database and I say, here you go, it comes in. There are some people who just collect a certain brand of mannequins. They tend to be mainly white, gay men, but they love a certain brand of mannequins. So when I get that mannequin in, like I said, I already have a list of people who are ready to buy them.
Wow. She says, no, I need to get some for fashion. I am learning how to sew and need one. Okay, what state are you in, Kiara? Because between Ms. Judi and myself, I'm kind of, I guess I call myself an understudy under her now. Yes. Oh, girl, you in South Carolina? Okay, well, first of all, I lived in South Charleston for 16 years before I moved here. So I'm familiar with Charleston. You and I will connect after this event, and I will connect with Ms. Judi, and we will figure it out for you.
That's like how we came up with, we're offering everybody a 50% discount on any of our product. What's your little handle that you use, the hashtag?
FashFet.
FashFet. Have you typed?
FashFet is the site that I will be. FashFet, I'll just tell you now, FashFet is an extension. It's another leg of Black Fashion World. It is the Black Fashion World Week, Fashion Week that I'm creating here in New York. So and that week, interestingly enough, the funding from that week supports the nonprofit. So every leg that I create of Black Fashion World, Black Fashion World is a conglomerate in case you didn't know. So every leg that I create, it will support the nonprofit because this is why we exist, to resolve the challenges that African Americans are experiencing in fashion. But Black Fashion World Week will be known as FashFet because it will be a fashion festival here in New York. The focus is on business to business and business to consumer retail. As well as the same time, we will celebrate the culture and we will celebrate the people who've gone before us and paved the way. So that's what FashFet is. It is F as in Frank, A as in Apple, S as in Sam, H as in Harry, and then FET as a festival, FETE. So Frank, Edward, Tom, Edward. So fashfet.com and just message me either way. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, Kiara.
Yeah, and 3 months, if you use that code when you check out on my site, you get a 15% discount. But I am going to be working with Miss Carla. So if I have mannequins available in the New York City area, I will filter them through her. And then you'll find out the best place if you want to put it on your Instagram or Facebook page to see what's coming up. I really am excited about partnering with you. I really would love more African Americans get in all aspects of the fashion. Like I said, the designers and the stylists and the models, they get the most attention, but there's so many other behind the scene type of ways to make a living that I hope more people will consider. And by sharing my story, and like I said, someone who wasn't in the fashion industry, I didn't go to FITM or anything like that, or FIT, I'm not even in New York. Look what's possible. And I just ask you to ask yourself, what else might I be able to do in fashion?
You know what? See, this is why I love her. She just wrapped us up. Thank you, Miss Judi. And everybody, I want to tell you, you come back at 6 o'clock because it is going to be an ebony night, the remainder of the evening. At 6 o'clock, we're going to be talking with photo editor, fashion photographer, and photo director for ebony.com, Keith Major. And then at 7 o'clock, we're going to have the finale. We're going to take an exploration through the Ebony Fashion Fair fashion show. If you haven't visited my website, blackfashioncareerday.org, please do so. You can take she said, that's awesome, Miss Judi. You can take a tour through an exhibition that they actually did for the fashion show. So
they had some Black mannequins for that too.
Yes, and you told me what to do about that. So Thank you. Okay. So everybody, tell Miss Judi, see you later. You'll be hearing more from Miss Judi and myself about these mannequins, and we'll see you all at 6 o'clock.